It's strange how a lifetime can fit into 2 suitcases, one for clothes and one for memories. I remember that morning like a scar that never quite fades. The sun was gentle, the kind that filters through lace curtains and paints golden streaks on the walls. The air smelled of cinnamon coffee and old wood polish, the scent of my home for 42 years. My son David was standing by the doorway, scrolling on his phone, pretending not to notice that I was folding the same cardigan over and over again. My daughter-in-law Lisa was in the kitchen, her perfume too sharp for the soft morning light. "Mom," David said finally, his tone clipped, businesslike, "the van will be here at 9. We should get going soon." I looked up, blinking as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. "The van?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes. From Maplewood Nursing Center." He said it the way one might talk about a grocery delivery. Impersonal. Practiced. Lisa appeared behind him, holding a travel mug. "It's for the best, Eleanor. You'll get the care you need there. You'll have friends your age and you won't have to worry about cooking or cleaning anymore." Cooking and cleaning. My daily joys, my ways of caring, my little acts of love, reduced now to burdens. I wanted to tell her that my knees still worked fine, that I still drove to the farmer's market every Thursday, that I still quilted blankets for the church charity. But the words got stuck somewhere between my heart and my mouth. David checked his watch. "Come on, Mom. We went over this." "No, you went over it," I thought. I was never given a vote. The ride to Maplewood was quiet except for the hum of the van. I clutched my handbag tight. Inside was my late husband's pocket watch and a small photograph of us from 1978, when our hair was thick and our smiles didn't yet know sorrow. The nursing home wasn't terrible. It was clean. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and lilacs, and the staff wore smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. My room had a window that overlooked a patch of grass and a single oak tree. The TV in the corner buzzed faintly, and the bed creaked when I sat down. "Make yourself at home," said the nurse, a kind-faced woman named Julie. "Lunch is at noon. Bingo at 3. Home. That word hurt more than I expected. Days passed in slow motion. The same schedule, the same small talk. "How's the chicken today?" "Who won at bingo?" "Did you catch that movie on Channel 6? I smiled. I nodded. I learned to laugh in all the right places. But every night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the quiet settled like dust, I cried softly into my pillow. I wasn't ready to be done living. One evening, while I was reading an old gardening magazine, Julie came in to check on me. She was younger than my son, maybe early 30s, with tired eyes that spoke of night shifts and too much empathy. "You okay, Miss Eleanor?" she asked. "I'm fine, dear. Just thinking." "About home?" I nodded. She hesitated, then sat on the edge of my bed. "You remind me of my grandma." Strong as an oak tree, but never loud about it. I smiled. "I used to be stronger." "No," she said gently. "You still are. You just forgot for a bit." Her words lingered long after she left. That night I took out my old notebook, the one with recipes and small reminders scribbled in faded ink, and I wrote something new. If they can decide where I live, I'll decide who I become. Weeks turned into months. I started teaching the other ladies how to use the small computer lab at the home. Most had never touched a laptop before, but they liked the idea of learning something modern. "Eleanor's Tech Club," Julie called it, half joking, but I took it seriously. We learned about emails, video calls, even online shopping. I taught them how to search for recipes and watch old black and white films on YouTube. One afternoon, a resident named Nora asked, "Can you really make money on the internet?" My grandson keeps saying he's a freelancer. I chuckled. "You can, dear. You just have to learn the right things." That question stayed with me. When the others left, I stayed behind. I typed, "How to invest online safely" into the search bar. A world opened before me: tutorials, blogs, financial advice for beginners. I started reading every night, not for greed, but for control. For the first time in months, I felt alive again. By Christmas, I'd opened a small online account with the help of a financial literacy forum for seniors. I used a few $100s, the last bit of my personal savings that David hadn't managed. I learned to read stock charts, dividends, market trends. I wasn't reckless. I treated it like my garden: small seeds, steady care. Julie would sometimes find me with my glasses slipping down my nose, staring at my laptop. "Miss Eleanor," she laughed, "you're gonna outsmart us all." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm just planting new roots." Spring came. The oak tree outside my window was budding again. Life in Maplewood continued: bingo, crafts, birthdays. But inside me, something was growing faster than the flowers outside. One day, while reading local business news, I saw a familiar name: Thompson Manufacturing, my late husband's old workplace, the small factory he'd given 25 years of his life to before retiring. Now it was struggling. The article said, "Local investor group considering acquisition." A thought took root in my mind, a wild, impossible thought. Could I be that investor? I laughed out loud at myself at first. "Eleanor, you old fool," I muttered. But I didn't close the article. I read it again and again. Sometimes impossible ideas are just possible ones waiting for courage. That night, as the rain tapped softly against the window, I whispered to the photo of my husband on the nightstand, "Oh, Tom, you always said I had a good head for numbers. Maybe it's time to prove you right." And for the first time since the day they sent me away, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a beginning. Sometimes strength doesn't roar. It whispers. It whispers at midnight when everyone's asleep. It whispers, "Try again." That whisper is what woke me before dawn most mornings at Maplewood. While the others slept, I'd sit by my window with a cup of weak coffee and my old laptop glowing faintly in the dark. The oak tree outside had started to bloom again, its leaves fluttering like small green flags. Every click of my keyboard felt like a heartbeat. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to reclaim something that had been taken from me: my dignity. A few weeks after reading that article about Thompson Manufacturing, I started researching what it would take to buy a share of a local business. It sounded ridiculous at first. Me, a woman who still sometimes forgot her email password, thinking about acquiring shares. But then I found an online forum for retired teachers who were learning to invest together. They called themselves the Silver Circle. I joined quietly, using the name Elm 68. I thought it sounded elegant, and I'd always loved elm trees. There, I met a man named Frank Dillard. He was in his 70s, a retired accountant from Ohio who loved helping others learn. Frank had a kind, patient way of explaining things. One afternoon, after answering one of my questions, he messaged me privately, "You've got a good mind for this, Elm. Don't underestimate yourself." I smiled. No one had said that to me in years. Over the next few months, Frank taught me everything from reading financial statements to understanding ownership percentages. I'd stay up late after lights out, scribbling notes like a college student again. Julie, my nurse friend, caught me once. "Miss Eleanor," she said, laughing softly. "You're up past midnight again?" I grinned. "I'm studying." "For what?" "For my second life." It started with small wins, little investments that grew slowly but surely. I learned to be patient. I learned to take joy in progress instead of perfection. By summer, my small account had tripled. Frank encouraged me to diversify, and we began looking at local opportunities. Then, one morning, I saw it again. That same company name in the local paper, Thompson Manufacturing, new investment round announced. My heart skipped a beat. The article said that the company had been bought by a regional firm, but was now opening shares for private investors to help fund new equipment. "Frank," I typed quickly, "what would it take for someone like me to invest in a company like this?" He replied within minutes. "Depends on the size of the investment. But if it's local, you might be able to buy in quietly. You just need someone to represent you." Represent me? That sounded powerful. I called my old lawyer, Mr. Sanderson, the same man who had handled my husband's estate. He was surprised to hear from me. "Mrs. Thompson," he said warmly, "it's been years. How are you?" "I'm still here," I said with a little laugh, "and I need some advice." When I told him what I wanted to do, there was a long pause on the phone. "You're serious?" "I am." He chuckled softly. "I always knew you had a sharp mind. Let's meet in my office next week. I'll set up the paperwork." I didn't tell David or Lisa. They thought I was still spending my days playing bingo and knitting doilies. Let them think that. I took a day pass from Maplewood. Julie helped me sign out, and I put on my best lavender dress and my late husband's gold brooch. When I walked into Mr. Sanderson's office, I felt my hands tremble, but not from fear, from purpose. We set up a trust account under a neutral name. That way, my investment wouldn't draw attention. Mr. Sanderson agreed to represent me quietly. By the end of the meeting, I had officially purchased my first small stake in Thompson Manufacturing, just 3%. Tiny, but enough to make me an owner. Life at Maplewood didn't change overnight, but I did. When I walked through those halls, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt like a woman with secrets. The good kind, the kind that keep your heart beating faster. Every few weeks, I'd check updates from Mr. Sanderson. The company was restructuring, bringing in new leadership, improving finances. My small investment grew, and I reinvested every dollar I earned. By the time autumn rolled around again, I owned 9%. One evening, I told Julie, "Julie, do you know what it feels like to own something again?" She tilted her head. "Like what?" "Like standing up after sitting too long. Your legs shake, but it feels good." She smiled. "You're incredible, Miss Eleanor." "No," I said softly, "just determined." Winter came early that year. The oak tree outside my window stood bare and brave against the cold. I was sipping cocoa when Julie came running in holding a tablet. "Miss Eleanor, look!" She showed me a photo from a local business newsletter. Thompson Manufacturing had appointed a new operations manager. My heart nearly stopped. It was David, my son. The caption read, "David Thompson, Operations Manager, Thompson Manufacturing." I stared at the screen for a long time. Julie touched my hand. "That's your son?" I nodded. She hesitated. "Does he know?" No, I whispered, and I don't want him to. Not yet. Over the next months, I learned everything about the company's inner workings through official reports and investor updates. I didn't interfere, not yet. I wanted to understand how things were being run. David was good at his job, from what I read. He had ideas for expansion, efficiency, growth. But I also knew that he was ambitious, sometimes too ambitious. One day, Frank and I were chatting online. "You ever think about taking a seat on the board?" he asked. "I'm just a small investor," I replied. "Doesn't mean you'll stay that way," he said. "You've got instinct, Elm. Don't let anyone box you in." That line hit me deep. Don't let anyone box you in. Not David, not the world, not age. By the next spring, with dividends and reinvestments, I'd reached 15% ownership, enough to have a voice, and enough to make people listen. I started visiting town more often under the pretense of doctor appointments. Julie always covered for me, bless her heart. She was the only one who knew everything. We'd sit in my room at night, laughing like schoolgirls, planning meetings and strategies. "You know," she said once, "if you ever decide to walk in there and show them who you are, I want front row seats." I laughed. One day, maybe. A year later, Thompson Manufacturing announced it was seeking a full buyout. The parent company wanted to sell its stake to a serious local investor who could preserve jobs and modernize operations. I called Mr. Sanderson immediately. "Do you think we can do it?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's a large sum, but your portfolio—" "Eleanor, you've done very well. If we liquidate some holdings and take a small loan, it's possible." My heart raced. "Then let's do it." The paperwork took months. Meetings, calls, signatures, documents. I stayed calm through it all, even when my son unknowingly signed off on reports mentioning my name hidden behind the trust. The day the deal closed, I sat quietly in my Maplewood room, staring at the oak tree again. Its leaves shimmered in the golden afternoon light. Julie came in, breathless. "It's done?" I nodded. She hugged me tight. "You did it. You own the company." I smiled, tears in my eyes. "We did it, dear." I looked out the window again and whispered to the photo of my husband on the nightstand. "Tom, we're home again, just in a different way." That night, I wrote in my old notebook again, the same one where I'd scribbled my first vow months ago. They sent me away to fade quietly, but I bloomed instead. I am the oak tree now, rooted, rising, and unshaken. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew this. I wasn't done living. Not by a long shot, and soon the world, and my son, would know it too. The first time I drove past the Thompson Manufacturing building after becoming its owner, I had to pull over and sit for a while. It was all still there, the red brick facade, the faded sign, the small parking lot dotted with old sedans and pickup trucks, the same place where my husband, Tom, had worked for 25 years, where he'd come home smelling of metal and motor oil, but always with a smile, proud of what he'd built with his hands. Now it was mine. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Can you believe it, Tom?" I whispered. "We've come full circle." The air smelled of early spring, damp soil, and the faint sweetness of blooming lilacs. The world felt alive again, and for the first time in years, so did I. A week later, Mr. Sanderson arranged for me to visit the factory incognito. Officially, I was there as a potential consultant. Unofficially, I was the new owner's eyes and ears, my own eyes and ears. I chose my best outfit, a soft gray cardigan, a pearl brooch, and a matching hat. something that said respectable but not wealthy. I didn't want attention, not yet. When I stepped inside, the smell of machine oil and paper hit me like a memory. I could almost see Tom's ghost walking down the aisles, his lunchbox in hand. A young receptionist greeted me with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes, dear," I said. "With Mr. David Thompson." She clicked her mouse and nodded. "He's expecting you at 10. Would you like some coffee while you wait?" "Please." As I sat there sipping coffee from a paper cup, I could hear faint laughter coming from one of the offices down the hall. A man's voice. Confident. Hurried. Familiar. Then the door opened and he stepped out. David. My son. He was older than the last time I saw him, a little gray at the temples, a little heavier around the middle. But his walk was the same. Brisk, decisive, like someone who always needed to be in control. He didn't notice me at first. He was busy talking to another man about production quotas and supply chain costs. But when he turned toward the reception desk, his eyes flicked in my direction. For a split second, he froze. Then he smiled politely, not recognizing me. "Ma'am, are you here for the meeting?" I nodded, my heart pounding. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, with you." He extended his hand. "David Thompson, operations manager." His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind men use in boardrooms. I met it with my own steady grip, masking the tremor beneath my skin. "Eleanor," I said. "Eleanor Mae." He smiled again. "Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. May. Let's step into my office." His office looked nothing like the simple room Tom once had when he worked here. This one had glass walls, sleek furniture, even a small espresso machine in the corner. David gestured for me to sit. "So, you're consulting for the new ownership group?" I nodded. "Something like that." "Well, we're in an exciting transition," he said proudly. "Our previous investors sold their shares, and the new ownership has big plans for modernization." I smiled. "Yes, I've heard. Tell me, how do you feel about the change?" He shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "Change is good when it's smart, but we'll see what kind of people they are. You never know with investors. Sometimes they just care about profit." I felt a small ache in my chest. Sometimes they just care about profit. "Do you think that's what happened before?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "My father used to work here, actually, long time ago. Different world back then. He believed in loyalty, hard work, all that old school stuff." "Do you?" I asked softly. He blinked, as if caught off guard by the question. "I try. But times change, Mrs. May." I smiled faintly. "Yes, but people don't. Not really." For a moment, he looked at me. Really looked at me. Then he shook his head slightly and smiled again, back to business. Over the following weeks, I made regular visits under the guise of consulting. David remained polite, but distant, never suspecting a thing. I observed the employees, took notes, and spoke with department heads. To my surprise, many of them remembered Tom. "Your husband was a good man," one older machinist told me. "Always stayed late to help the new guys, the kind of man you don't see much anymore." I smiled, blinking back tears. "Yes," I said quietly. "He was." It warmed my heart to know his kindness hadn't faded with time. At night, I'd return to Maplewood, and Julie would be waiting in my room, eager for updates. "So?" she'd ask. "Did he recognize you yet?" "Not yet," I'd say with a grin. "But he looks right through me, like I'm invisible. And that's just fine. For now." One morning, I overheard two employees whispering near the break room. They say the new owner's some big investor from out of state, one said. Nah, replied the other. I heard she's local, some retired teacher with deep pockets. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Later, David mentioned it himself. Crazy rumors going around, he said. Apparently the company's owned by some mystery woman, but no one knows her name. I raised an eyebrow. And what do you think? He chuckled. If she's smart enough to stay anonymous, she's probably smart enough to make money. I smiled. Maybe she's also kind enough to give second chances. He shrugged. Kindness doesn't pay bills. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Over time, employees began to warm to me. They saw me not as a consultant, but as a listener. I asked about their families, their memories, their struggles. A young woman named Clara told me about her sick daughter. I arranged through the company to quietly cover her child's medical insurance. A middle-aged worker named Hank was about to be laid off. I made sure the restructuring plan kept him employed. Mr. Sanderson would call sometimes, amused. Eleanor, you're supposed to be the owner, not Santa Claus. I'm just fixing what's broken, I'd reply. One Friday afternoon, I overheard David speaking sharply to one of his subordinates. You think we can afford compassion right now? He snapped. We need results, not sob stories. The words cut through me like glass. After the employee left, I knocked on his door. Mrs. May, he said, surprised. Did you need something? Yes, I said calmly. A word. He frowned but nodded. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. You know, David, sometimes results and compassion aren't enemies. He sighed. With all due respect, you don't know what it's like to run a company. I smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I know what it's like to lose your humanity trying to. He looked annoyed, glancing at his watch. I appreciate your perspective, but no, I said softly but firmly. You don't. But one day you will. Then I left, leaving him speechless. A few days later, Mr. Sanderson called me. Eleanor, the board is meeting next week to introduce the majority shareholder, you. My heart raced. So soon? Yes, it's time. That night I sat in my room, unable to sleep. Julie sat beside me, holding my hand. You ready? She whispered. I don't know, I said. He's my son. And yet, he's a stranger. Julie squeezed my hand. Then remind him who you are. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee. I walked in with Mr. Sanderson by my side, dressed in a simple navy suit. Heads turned. David was already there, looking over documents. When he saw me, confusion crossed his face. Mrs. May, what are you doing here? Mr. Sanderson smiled. David, may I introduce you formally to the new majority shareholder of Thompson Manufacturing, Mrs. Eleanor Mae Thompson. For a moment, no one breathed. David blinked, laughed nervously. That's not funny. But when he saw the documents, her signature, her shares, her ownership, his laughter died. His face drained of color. Mom? I nodded slowly. Hello, David. The room went silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. He sank into his chair, staring at me as if seeing a ghost. I thought you were in a nursing home? I said gently. I was, for a while, but I found something better to do with my time. After the meeting ended, David followed me into the hallway. His voice shook. Mom, why? Why didn't you tell me? I turned to him, my eyes wet. Because you stopped listening long before I stopped talking. He looked down. I thought you needed help. I did, I said softly, but not the kind you gave. You wanted me out of sight, out of the way. So I left, and I learned. And now, here we are." Tears filled his eyes. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I whispered, "but you did. And the worst part was that you never looked back." We stood there in silence. Finally, I reached out and took his hand, the same hand that once held mine as a little boy crossing the street. "I don't want revenge, David. I just want respect, and maybe a little bit of redemption." He swallowed hard. "You have both." "No," I said, softly. "You have to earn yours." Then I walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned, broken, and maybe, just maybe, ready to change. When the morning sun broke over Maplewood that Tuesday, its light felt different, warmer, softer, as if it carried some quiet forgiveness from the heavens. I stood by the window of my cottage, the one near Willow Creek, where I'd planted daisies and honeysuckle. The dew shimmered like tiny pearls, and the smell of coffee filled the room. It had been nearly 2 months since that unforgettable morning when I'd walked into the company as its new owner. Since then, the gossip around town had spread faster than spring wind. Folks in Maplewood liked to whisper about how the old schoolteacher from Elm Street had outsmarted her son's company, how the woman everyone thought was in a nursing home had become the most powerful figure in their little county. But I didn't feel powerful. I just felt tired. That kind of tiredness that sits not in your bones, but somewhere deep in your heart. The kind that comes from years of holding on, forgiving, and learning to live through the cracks. A week after that day in the office, I'd received a letter. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, neat, careful. David's. "Mom, I don't know how to start this. I've written and erased these words 100 times. I guess I just want to say, I'm sorry. Not because of what everyone's saying about me now, but because when I look back, I see what I became. A man so afraid of failure that he forgot who taught him how to dream." I was ashamed, Mom. When Dad died, I didn't know how to be strong. So I pretended to be. I thought if I took control, I could protect what was left. But all I did was push you away. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you'll let me explain. David. I held that letter for a long time, tracing the pen marks with my fingertips. The paper had tear stains, not mine, but his. It surprised me how seeing those faint salt rings softened something in me that had been hard for years. Maybe people don't change overnight, but sometimes a single honest word can be the first stone in rebuilding a bridge. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing on the porch of David's house, the same home where I used to read bedtime stories to him, where Henry and I had celebrated birthdays and Christmas mornings. The door opened slowly. David stood there, thinner than before. His eyes shadowed with regret. He looked older than his 42 years. "Mom," he said softly, as if afraid I'd vanish like a dream. "Hello, David," I replied, holding a small basket of baked rolls. "Thought I'd bring breakfast. I know how you forget to eat when you're worried." For a moment, he just stared, perhaps remembering the same mornings when I'd packed his lunchbox and scolded him for skipping meals. Then his shoulders dropped and he stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The air smelled faintly of coffee and dust, like time had stopped here the day I left. We sat at the kitchen table. For a while, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence. Finally, he sighed. "You have every right to hate me, Mom." "I don't hate you," I said. I just wish things had been different. His eyes glistened. I ruined everything. I tried to protect what Dad built, but I lost sight of who I was protecting it for. When they told me you'd left the nursing home, I thought—" He stopped, his voice trembling. "I thought I'd lost you forever." I reached across the table and took his hand. "David, you never lost me. You just forgot to look back." Over the next few weeks, I began visiting the company more often, not to oversee things, but to observe. I didn't want revenge. I wanted renewal. David had resigned from his position after the truth came out, but when I saw how much the employees still respected him, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including him. I called him into my office one morning. He looked uneasy, standing in the same room where I'd once revealed my ownership. "If this is about my resignation, it's not," I interrupted gently. "It's about redemption." He blinked. "What?" I smiled. "I'm offering you the role of managing director. Under my supervision, of course." His eyes widened. "Mom, after everything—" "Yes, after everything," I said, "because this company needs someone who understands both failure and humility. And because forgiveness isn't something we earn, it's something we give." Tears welled in his eyes. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," I said softly, "but I'm giving it anyway." In the weeks that followed, something shifted between us. We began to share lunches again, not as mother and child at war, but as two people learning to be family once more. Clara, my dear friend from the nursing home, often visited. She'd laugh, seeing us bicker about business decisions. "Look at you two," she'd say. "The Thompsons are back, and stronger than ever." Sometimes I'd catch David watching me quietly during meetings. I could tell he was studying, not the charts or profits, but the woman he'd once underestimated. And I knew, deep down, that he was beginning to see not just his mother, but the person I'd become. One afternoon, as we sat under the oak tree in the company courtyard, the same tree where Henry used to meet me for lunch when we were young, David spoke again. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking. We should rename the company, make it something that reflects what it's really about." I smiled. "And what's that?" He hesitated, then said, "Grace. Because that's what saved me." My throat tightened. "Grace," I whispered, feeling Henry's presence in the wind. "That's beautiful." So we did. The company was renamed Thompson and Grace Industries, a name born from pain, but built on forgiveness. Months later, on a bright spring morning, I attended the town's community fair. People smiled, waved, whispered kind things, but what meant most was seeing David there, helping set up stalls, talking with the children, laughing like he hadn't in years. He came over with 2 cups of lemonade. "For you, boss," he said playfully. I chuckled. "Careful, or I'll dock your pay." He grinned, then looked serious. "Mom, thank you for everything." I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy I'd raised, nor the man who'd hurt me, but someone who had finally grown into his father's shoes. "David," I said softly, "I forgave you long before you asked, because love, real love, doesn't keep score." We stood there, side by side, watching children run through the fields, the sun warming our faces. In that moment, I realized life doesn't always give us perfect endings, but sometimes it gives us something better, a second chance to write them ourselves. And as the wind rustled through the daisies, I whispered a silent prayer to Henry. "We did it, love. He found his way home."